Thanks for joining me today. I'm Phoenix. Originally, this page was called Crime and Mystery by Wild Plants, but today I get to officially welcome you and say welcome to Ivy and Alibis. If you're new here or new to this page in general, we're keeping the topics pretty much the same. This is where we're going to sit with topics that are often strange, sometimes murderous, haunting, uncomfortable, supernatural, paranormal, or just like hard to understand and explain in depth. You know, the moments that don't really make sense even after they're long past or over with. This episode is a little bit different. I don't have a specific case to give you yet. I'm still working on refining some of them. So the stories that you're about to hear were shared anonymously. So there's no names or faces I can give you to put behind them. They're just from people trying to explain something they experienced and that they couldn't fully understand. A lot of these are going to come off of Reddit threads, some of them from some of the longest running paranormal archive threads on there. Some were posted once and just never followed up on, and especially those ones added to a lot of what makes them unsettling or eerie. Sometimes reading things like this don't feel like stories, they almost feel like memories. So whether you believe in the paranormal, the strange, the unexplained or unexpected, or if you're someone who thinks there might always be a logical explanation for things, I appreciate you giving us a listen. Alright, let's get into it with the first story. This was off of Paranormal Workplace thread in Reddit, and it starts with this. The building wasn't supposed to be creepy. That's just how the story starts. It was just old. Originally a house from the early 1900s, later converted into an office space. Renovated in parts, but not completely. And according to the person telling this story originally, you could feel the difference. They worked late often, and by 9 p.m. the building was usually completely empty. And the silence, it wasn't a peaceful silence. It felt heavy. One night around 9:30, they were sitting at the reception desk. Most of the lights were off, and just one overhead light was on behind them. Everything else was dark. That's when they heard it, a skittering sound. Not footsteps, something sounding faster, closer to the ground. And that person looked up and saw her, an older woman with short white hair, wearing what looked like a pale cardigan, but she wasn't standing. She was crouched, kind of low to the ground, in a way that didn't look human. It didn't look right. Her arms were bent strangely, her legs were tucked under her, and her head was tilted upwards, looking directly at them, smiling. The witness described it like this. It didn't feel like she noticed me. It felt like she already knew I was there. They froze completely, and couldn't move, and couldn't speak. They blinked, and she had moved closer. Without footsteps, no sounds, just closer, still smiling and still watching. That's when the instinct finally kicked in. The person stood up slowly and walked, quickly, but didn't run, towards the office, closed the door, locked it, and then stayed there. Here's what makes it a little bit worse. This wasn't the first time. Months earlier, this person had seen a woman walk into the break room, completely normal, nothing strange or out of the ordinary. And they followed a few seconds later, but the room was empty. There's no exits, and there was no one in there. The room smelled really strongly of perfume, though, a very specific one, the same one that was like their grandmother used to wear. Later, after asking around, they had learned that there was a woman who died in the building years ago on that same floor. The story wraps up with a single sentence. I don't stay late to work anymore. Honestly, I don't think most people would want to. By that point, I would be so heebed out of my jeebies that I would have a hard time even coming into work in the daytime, let alone trying to convince myself to stay later at night. Like, I'm not easily creeped out either, to a sense of where I can't still perform a duty or task. And that would have been enough for me, especially because it's not the first time that happened. Just like off-settling and smiling at me in an unnaturally crouched position would be enough to 0 to 100 floor me. I'm down here. I'm kind of scared. Nope. Boom. All the way up here. I am ready to go home. I don't get paid enough for this. And that's my scale. Story number 2 comes from a wilderness and camping thread on Reddit. This one felt really different and more primal. It takes place somewhere that we already don't fully trust as an animal. Our instincts tell us to be alert. It's the woods. It takes place in the woods. A group of friends go camping. They're going for a weekend trip. It's nothing unusual. Until midnight. The group of friends started hearing footsteps, not crashing, not running, but like sauntering and walking. It's slow, very measured, crunching, a pause, crunching, a pause, almost like something's just beyond the tree line and it's circling them, calculated. They called out to see if anyone was there. Nobody responds. They call it again in a little while, asking, "Hey, are you okay?" Nothing. Then the footsteps started again, and it sounded closer this time. That's when one of them said, "It really does sound like a person." Once that was said, everything had changed, because now they couldn't not hear it. Every time they heard footsteps, it sounded like a person to them. And then a voice came. It was somewhere out in the trees, calling for one of their names. It called softly at first. It almost sounded like one of their friends, but it was the friend's voice of the person sitting right next to them that it sounded like. And it was like they were almost speaking at the same time. The voice then came again and again, trying out different tones, repeating short phrases, sometimes speaking in a slightly wrong cadence, like it's practicing. It was trying to learn what to say and how to say it properly. The group stopped responding to it entirely. Nobody felt like engaging with it anymore. They didn't want to encourage it. They weren't trying to acknowledge it. And as it got later, they started to feel like being near their fire at their campsite was the only safe place. Everything outside of the glow felt wrong, felt scary and threatening, and almost tempting, like tempting them out into it. The voice continued for hours, closer away, and then closer to them, and then farther away again. Eventually, though, there was silence for a while. When the morning came, they saw footprints. They almost looked human. They also looked very, very wrong. The details of them explain them to be too long of a foot itself, too narrow, like our feet usually branch out and go a little wider with our toes for support. They just didn't make sense. The stride didn't seem to make sense either. Whatever made them almost seemed like it was trying to understand how people walked or mimic how people walked. The group of friends decided that they needed to pack up immediately. And they did. And they left. They didn't choose to stay another night. According to the anonymous poster who shared this story, they never went back, and that person specifically doesn't camp anymore. The scariest part wasn't being watched, and they said it wasn't finding the footsteps the next morning. It was hearing something that evening, trying to sound human, trying to call to them, and slowly getting better at it. I'm actually given goosebumps by that one. There's tons of stories, especially in the Appalachia area, where there's voices that will call out and sound maybe like people you know, or just human enough that it seems like they're calling out to you, and everything in the folklore tells you not to engage with them and to more or less mind your business and hope that you make it out of the woods in the morning time. And I think they did the right move by following that mindset, honestly, because I would have been out of there too, all done. I also would have been trying to tell the person, like, hey, stop talking to whatever that is. but I'm also a firm believer in just not engaging on the initial onset. Like, if something sounds like the friend that's sitting next to me and that friend is sitting next to me, I'm not gonna call out to the thing trying to mimic it, because I have the real friend right next to me, hopefully. Um, so I'd be absolutely, again, start here, end here, it's time to go. Before I start story 3, I just want to say that it's been really nice to sit outside and record. So in this episode, you will probably hear like the animals and the birds and stuff in the background. I'm still setting up my personal recording studio area, and while the weather is good, I'm gonna be outside enjoying it and living my best life. And I highly encourage, when you're able to do the same if you're able to. So, story 3. This is another Paranormal Archive submission. And this one starts with grief. So, we're going to go on the topic of grief, and I'm going to read it out as it was submitted. This one started with grief that doesn't feel real yet. The person telling this story had just lost their sister, suddenly and unexpectedly. The funeral had already happened. Everything felt quiet. Too quiet. A few nights later, around 2 a.m., the phone rang. Half asleep, they looked at the screen and froze. It was her name, her contact, her photo, and they answered. At first, nothing, just static sounds and cracking. Then there was breathing, and then her voice, soft, distorted, crackling through the speaker. Don't let Mom go alone tomorrow. There's a long pause, more static, and then the call ended. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. The next morning, they learned that their mom had planned to drive alone hours away to an appointment they needed to do. They insisted on going with her. Later that day, a truck lost control and crossed into their lane, right where their mom would have been alone. But they avoided it, barely. The person that sent the story retells it saying, they don't know why or what it was, but they answered the phone and it ended up mattering. Ooh, so that one's creepy to me in a different way. That's not like a ghoul creepy for me. That's like when people have premonitory dreams or that gut instinctual feeling and they listen to it and then something happens that would have like hurt or ended them, and they avoided that situation and event because they listened to that feeling or that call, or they didn't leave their house when the door was hard to open. And I mean, you can also balance that with understanding anxiety for people, especially nowadays, I think. However, that is one of those situations where she received that information and listened. And I think that is extremely cool and very special that, like, them and their mom was not hurt in that incident. And I don't know, maybe they had a little bit more of understanding for why. Maybe it was really their sister reaching out from beyond and they knew something that the poster didn't. Who knows? I think that's really remarkable, though. All right, this last one for me is like a literal horror story. Um, it's about mirrors. It's in an encounters archive. It was anonymously posted there. And it was titled. So this one's titled The Reflection That Stopped Copying Me. Mirrors are strange. Not at first, but if you sit and think about them too long, they become something else. This story starts small. There's tiny delays, blinking, and the reflection blinking just slightly after you, moving, and then it has to catch up. Subtle, almost subtle enough to ignore. Until one night, the person woke up for no reason and looked into the mirror, and they saw themselves. They were already awake, standing, watching over. while the person was still laying in bed, staring into the mirror. There's a long pause in fear. They shut their eyes and counted to 10 slowly and got the courage to open them again. When they opened them, everything was normal. However, after that, things escalated. Knocking. 3 knocks. Always from the mirror, like it's coming from behind the glass. Always at night. They covered the mirror, but one night, the cover slid off. Slowly, on its own, almost as if someone had reached out to one of the corners and pulled it down. Underneath it, their reflection. It was smiling at them this time. That was enough, and the person decided to get rid of the mirror completely the next day. They end their story off by saying this: I do not sleep with mirrors anymore, and if there was one where I'm visiting, I won't be where it's facing me. Yeah, honestly, that is also a high enough level of creepy where I would not want to be anywhere around it, and I probably wouldn't trust any mirrors ever again, because that reminds me of one, the movie Oculus. There's a horror movie about a haunted mirror, and then two, just how they've always been attributed to portals and other worlds or different dimensions, and I think that that is a pretty shared experience people have. Maybe not like everyone. There's enough accounts of mirrors giving that unsettling feeling and at least illusions or experiences for people, to which I try to avoid them even before anything like that's happened to me, honestly. So yeah, that is crazy. Okay. So maybe there are explanations for some of these. Sometimes there are. There usually are ways to try and explain the unexplainable. Old buildings do make noise. Grief does change perceptions. Fear tends to fill in the gaps. And even knowing that, these kinds of moments really stay with people because they don't feel like they're imagined. They don't feel pretend. They feel experienced because they are experienced. Maybe that's what makes them so unsettling, or at least a part of it. And maybe that's what draws us to them. Not knowing if they're 100% real or not, it adds to the illusion. It adds to the horror. It adds to the creepy. And who knows? They might have been real. I'm Phoenix. This is Ivy and Alibis. Please stay safe and maybe sleep with a light on tonight. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. And join you again soon with another episode.